here. And once again, welcome to our fourth season of the UX Quiz community. I'm Ioannis Feneris, joined by Dimitris Stathis, Dimitris Niavis, and Nikos Papas. It's wonderful to see one more time so many familiar faces, as well as those of you joining us for the first time. For our new attendees, here's a brief introduction about us. UX Quiz community is a space of UX and product design question mark there to discuss today. Professionals to connect and grow. We host events almost every quarter, bringing in experts and pioneers from around the world to dive deep into specific UX topics and have the opportunity to ask them the questions directly. Now, your participation and your questions are what make this session special. So please don't hold back. Give your questions, participate in the discussion because it's actually your discussion. Now, you can join us on LinkedIn, and please note that you can find all the recordings of this and all the past sessions on the YouTube channel and on our website at uxgreece.community. Okay, I think we can start. Before we start, a big thank you to our sponsors, the UX Prodigy, Evidence-Based, Janssen Labs, and the From Scratch Studio. Their support doesn't just make these events possible, but also it allows us to give away some fantastic books. And here's how you can enter to win. Just share a key takeaway from today's session or pose a thought-provoking question on LinkedIn. But please use the hashtags UX and UX Greece in your post, and you have about 5 hours from now to share this post. We will collect the posts tomorrow, randomly select 2 winners, and contact you directly via LinkedIn. Now, as I mentioned, this is a very special event for our community. We are truly honored to have with us today Jesse James Garret. Dimitris, would you do the honors of introducing Jesse and kicking off our first topic?
Yes, of course. So hello, everyone. It's very nice seeing you all here, and especially Jesse. It's so nice. I think we have many great topics to cover. I'm thrilled to introduce to you one of the most influential voices in user experience design, the author of The Elements of User Experience, and the person who coined the term Ajax. Jesse James Garret has fundamentally shaped how we think about digital products today. As co-founder of Adaptive Path, which he will tell us a little bit about this in a moment, and creator of the famous Elements of UX model, his work continues to influence designers worldwide. Jesse, I think the stage is yours, and please, everyone, let's ask all your questions.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for the introduction. I really appreciate it. I love having these kinds of conversations. I love learning from everyone what your concerns are.
Awesome.
So just to bring you up to speed a little bit about who I am. These days, I'm a leadership coach. I work individually with leaders of design teams all around the world, helping them to unpack their challenges and level themselves up to overcome them. So I have the really the fortune to be able to see inside a lot of different design organizations and a lot of different design teams and their challenges. So that's the perspective that I'm bringing to the conversation here today, and I look forward to hearing yours.
Okay, that's great. Yanis, I think
Yeah, I mean, I was late telling Dimitris, are you going to give the first question or?
yeah.
Okay.
Let's start with with an introductory question. We'd love to hear a little bit about the story behind Adaptive Path. How did it start? What was the vision at the time?
Mhm.
And what story did you tell to your clients, and how did they perceive it, back at those days?
Yeah. So Adaptive Path was the UX consultancy that I co-founded back in 2001, when there were no UX consultancies. And in fact, there were not even really a whole lot of UX jobs. And what was happening with the tech industry at the time, especially in San Francisco, where we were all based, was that the whole place was burning down. I mean, everybody was losing their jobs. All the companies were going out of business. All the startups were crashing and burning. And there was a real question as to whether this work was legitimate work, or whether it was part of the hype and the excitement of the dot-com era, and was not actually a real thing that was going to persist in the world. Um, and so we were a group of individuals who had all been uh, knocked around by the circumstances of the market of the time. And we realized that we could, all of us, compete against each other for the increasingly smaller number of available roles out there. Or we could band together and try to make the case for something bigger and really try to advance the idea of user experience in people's minds, even as the market seemed to be in a state of collapse. And so that's what we did. And we put our heads together and really we took all of our individual methodologies and threw them all into a pot together and stirred it around for a long time. And eventually that soup became a set of practices that we ended up teaching to the world through our workshops, through the conferences that we ran. My book, The Elements of User Experience, originally came out in 2002. Is still in print all these years later, is another part of our campaign, really, to educate and inform and evangelize the field to people. So, yeah, that's that story. I mean, that's the start of that story. We were a consultancy for 13 years before we sold the company in 2014 to the American bank Capital One, where we became a part of their brand new unified design team and helped to establish the culture and the practices and the approach of that entire enterprise design organization. So it's all work that I'm very proud of.
Jesse, 20 years ago, 2000, March 2nd, 2001, if I am not mistaken, so more than 20 years,
Yeah.
we struggled today to explain the value of UX in our agency clients. So what was the situation back then? How did your clients perceive your consultancy in UX? Did you actually use the word UX, or you used another keyword and actually run
Yeah.
your methodologies in silo?
We made a very conscious decision to put our weight and our emphasis behind the term UX and really try to champion that term. We did not use the word design to describe our services for a long time, because what we felt like what we were doing was a really something that was a lot closer to product strategy in what we were actually delivering to organizations. We had very modest visual design practices. Visual design was never a significant part, and neither was front-end technology, for that matter, really a significant part of what we delivered to our clients. The value that we were able to convince people of was the value of having a methodology, having a framework, having a way of thinking about doing new things for an organization. For a lot of these organizations, the web was a brand new thing that everybody told them that they had to get involved in and be a part of. They did that, but then they didn't really know their place within it, or how this new technology and this new medium could align with their business priorities. And we helped them resolve that uncertainty and untangle that ambiguity and help them create some clarity in the face of the unknown and develop strategies and approaches to both the products as well as how they build them.
Okay, sounds awesome. From today's perspective, what do you see as the biggest highlight in Adaptive Path's journey, and what was the most challenging moment that you can recall?
Highlights and challenges. Boy, the highlights are, there's just so many amazing things that I'm just so grateful that we got the chance to do. It's hard to pin it down to just one thing. We built our own product in-house, a web analytics tool called MeasureMap, which then was very quickly bought up by Google and became part of what eventually became known as Google Analytics, which every person who touches Google Analytics out there today is using some piece of our work, which is just a wonderful thing to see endure out there. Obviously, our enduring impact on the culture at Capital One is something that I continue to be proud of. Um, the challenges were really the challenges of continuing to adapt, ironically, for Adaptive Path, continuing to adapt to a changing market, continuing to adapt to our changing understanding of the nature of our work. I mean, we were really figuring everything out as we went along. And we were continually having to revise our understanding of what we were even doing as we were going. And that's exhausting, living with that much uncertainty and trying to continue to create the new and create more clarity and drive more understanding. It's a lot. It's a lot to keep up with. And so for me, there was always more that we could be doing than we had the resources to be able to do. And so I always kind of look back on that and find myself wishing there were more that we could have done in the time that we had together.
Great to hear that from you. It's great to hear that from you.
So uh, let me continue from something that you mentioned before, and of course, something that everyone knows, the elements of user experience.
Mm.
And in that book, there is a famous diagram. Uh, what's the story behind the diagram that eventually became the book? Was the version we know today final from the start? I guess not. Or did it evolve over time? Was it created for a presentation, a personal notes, or an article?
Yeah, well, so the origin of the elements of user experience, which many of you will have seen in its original form as a five-plane diagram that kind of outlines a lot of the considerations that go into the user experience design process. It's been adapted over the years in many, many different forms. A lot of people like to turn it into an iceberg for some reason. I think that helps people to get the idea of kind of layers of influence. But it came about because user experience design was a brand new thing. We were not even really yet talking about it as user experience. Some people were looking at the problems that they were facing and were talking about it in the language of information architecture. And other people were looking at the problems they were facing and talking about it in the language of interaction design. Still others were talking in terms of information design or other kinds of disciplines that had something to say about this new medium. And I looked at all of the different terminology that people were using to describe the problem space. And I was looking for a way to fit it all together to be able to explain to my clients. I was at the time working for another consultancy before we started Adaptive Path. I was looking for a way to explain to my clients what we were there to talk about in any given meeting. And elements evolved over the course of several months, I guess maybe 6 months of kind of iteration and evolution before it took the final form that we all have known it in for the last 20 years or so.
Good to know. So 20 years on, with evolution of products and interfaces, how do you view the relevance of its core message? Does it still hold true today? Have you ever considered updating it through all these years?
A lot of people have asked me over the years about updating the model, and I think that first of all, I think that these kinds of updates are rarely improvements. When people try to take old work and bring it forward, I think that any adaptation or evolution of the model that I would make today would probably just make it less clear in the interest of being more inclusive. Uh, and what the model, I think, has always represented is simply a way of thinking about these kinds of challenges. And the reason that it has continued to resonate with people, I think, is because that way of thinking remains relevant. Um, the book does not really talk about process too much, because it's not really intended to map to process or speak to process. That said, the processes that we use now are very, very different from the processes that we had back when I wrote the book. And in a lot of ways, I think it may be more challenging for people to see how the considerations that are captured in the diagram actually manifest in a design process. So, if there is any kind of um, elaboration to be done on the model for a modern audience, it probably has to do with connecting it to our modern design processes.
Okay, okay.
Okay. Um, so,
So I
uh,
have a lot of questions based on each of your words, but let's keep it like lean, and then we can follow up because I think we are going to sidetrack all the questions we have gathered from the audience. So I'm going to keep
Sure.
myself muted
Okay.
for now.
and the problem is that we have only 1 hour, so we're just trying to cover
Yeah.
as much as possible. So, as you said in the beginning, right now your role is more like coaching people.
Mhm.
So, as someone who coaches design leaders, what would you say is the biggest issue or challenge that they face today?
I think the biggest challenge that they face, quite simply, is that nobody's ever done this job before.
Hmm.
The role of digital product design leader is, I mean, depending on the scale that you're talking about, it, it's not even as old as Adaptive Path. In a lot of cases, there were no VPs of digital product design for our first 10 years as a consultancy. So I think that the roles themselves are brand new, these leadership roles, which means that the expectations are unclear. The value that you deliver and the mandate that you carry, especially at the executive level, there's no precedent. There's no decades of history to draw on. You're not the 12th or the 15th design leader that they've had in the company history. You're the first or the second. And it really changes the nature of the work, especially if you're a very senior person and you've been very successful in your career, you've probably been a very senior person for a while, which means that you haven't had other people above you in your organizations to learn from in terms of how to be a design leader, how to be a design executive. So I just see a lot of design leaders, and this again really applies around the world, uh, who are forced into this position of having to make it up as they go along because they've never seen anybody else do the job, and nobody around them can tell them exactly what the job looks like.
So we are still in the early phase of this industry of UX and product.
I think definitely at the executive leadership level, there is a lot of new territory here, and it's going to be honestly, it's probably going to be a couple of decades before we really
Mhm.
get to a, I think, a common sense of what that leadership role looks like.
Okay, okay, that's so true.
And at the same time, sorry, Yanis, but I feel that at the same time, it's a great opportunity in order to shape those roles into, let's say, a better model than different roles that have been shaped so far.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, it's necessary, I think, it's on us to shape those roles, um, because otherwise they will be shaped for us by design's cross-functional partners. And that can lead to design teams being set up to attempt to fulfill a whole lot of expectations that don't align with the actual value that they have to offer.
Yeah. Jesse, talking about like the first generation of design executives or designers in general, do you now see differences between like a first generation and current generation of designers? So do you see a different perspective and different way of working? Because you're talking with a lot of leaders and designers. So
Yeah. I think it has less to do with generations and it has more to do with your individual work history, your personal work history. The practices across the field are so diverse. There's so many different ways of setting up a product development organization. And there are so many different ways that design can deliver value within a product development organization that you could spend your whole career just inside organizations where uh, design is always an equal peer to product. Design has a robust UX research function that reports directly to the head of design. There are built-in touch points in the road mapping and strategic prioritization processes where design has input and all of those kinds of things. And assume that that's how design is done everywhere. And then find yourself potentially in in an organization that follows another radically different, but also very common model where design is a delivery function that is subordinate to product, that your head of design isn't participating in product road mapping meetings because that's not part of what design is there to do. Your head of design is there to optimize a pixel delivery machine, which, is fine for what it is as a value proposition. It certainly is something that can be managed on more of a kind of an equal footing with engineering. But if your idea about what you're there to do as a designer and as a design leader comes from this other place, you're going to have a really hard time in that environment, and vice versa. I mean, I meet people who've spent their entire careers inside organizations like Amazon and Meta and these kinds of very large scale kind of feature factory style organizations where the kind of classical UX approach of doing this deep inquiry and design exploration and ideation and all of those kinds of things as part of a design process, it's never been part of their process. It's never been part of their understanding of what they were there to do. So then you get these people from these different sides trying to engage together, and they're talking past each other because they're talking about completely different approaches to design.
okay, now I have more lot question about process and question about roles. So let's focus on roles, and then we are going to speak about process
Okay.
and methodology. So back in 2009, in a very controversial keynote speech you gave, you said that there are no information architecture or interaction designers. There are only UX designers. I repeat, this is 15 years ago. So 15 years later, what's your view on that? Has the specialization and fragmentation of the UX roles and the product roles, product design roles, like UX researchers, UI designers, interaction designers, UX designers, helped or hindered the field?
I think it helped the field overall. I think overcoming the job title fragmentation and the role definition fragmentation, again, we find ourselves in a kind of back in the same place in some ways, but just to removing that fragmentation, I think simplified the message about UX design at a really crucial point 15 years ago when that message needed to be simplified in order to build credibility for these design teams and for these organizations. And so I think it was the right thing in that moment. There were certainly some things that were lost in that. I think in particular, information architecture practice really kind of fell by the wayside in a lot of people's design processes following that turn. At the same time, what we now have that we didn't have before are specialist information architecture consultancies and specialist information architecture consultants who have kept that flame burning for that discipline and for that work and have established an identity for it distinct from user experience design, and I don't think that would have happened otherwise. So, yeah.
That was actually, thank you for asking those questions back then, because for all of us, we found these discussions like we were being in between of something that was our initial concerns, trying to understand, the key elements of this field. So finding out that there are controversial issues, it was quite relaxing for us to embrace the fact that this is nothing set in stone. We are actually living the romantic, period of this new industry. So thank you for asking those questions and giving those hot topics back then.
Thank you.
So about those roles thing, I have this, something that at least the past years has started coming in my life. And recently you said that the gap between designers and product managers exists partly because product managers take power from those actually building the product, who are the designers and the developers. Aren't the PMs considered from designers as part of the design process themselves, given their decisions and ownership? What's the perspective on how the PM roles will evolve in the future?
Okay, so first of all, I want to contextualize that quote, which is that what I was saying in that talk um, was really reflecting what I was hearing from designers about product managers and vice versa. And what I heard from designers was that they perceived product managers to be taking the power away from design. And I think that the kind of the tug of war between design and product that exists these days really is about who has the better informed view about where the product should go. And design has relied on design methodology and design process to kind of ensure that the design point of view is robustly informed and that it has a lot of the kind of the relevant inputs necessary to make these kinds of strategic decisions. And I think designers and look at product management process and they don't see that same level of maturity. They don't see that same level of sophistication, and they especially don't see that same level of attention to signals from outside. I think that they look at the way that product managers set priorities, and it feels much more like the internal signals carry a much heavier weight than the signals from the actual users and from the actual market. And I think that's part of the sense of disconnect for designers. I think the opportunity is for designers to be the facilitators that we so naturally are as part of our processes historically, but that hasn't really been a part of the culture of product management to the same degree. And so I think that that's an opportunity for design to bring maybe not a unique perspective, but the most holistic perspective to these product strategy conversations. Yeah, cross-functionally.
So actually, but from your own eyes, you see the gap between design and product, right? Or also this topic was like what you were brought from words of designers. So actually, let me rephrase that. Do you see any gap between product and design nowadays?
As I think, again, it's a very diverse environment. I think it depends on the expectations that your product people bring to the mix. I think it depends on the expectations that your executives bring to the mix. If you have an executive team that is used to working with strong, deep design talent, they're going to have certain expectations for what design is going to bring to the table, where design's voice matters in their processes, and they're going to create that space. If they don't have that understanding of design, if they've only ever worked with kind of shiny pixel delivery level design value, they're not going to see why they should have you a part of these other kinds of conversations. And so then that's where this advocacy comes in for design leaders to really make the case that they bring something that that product doesn't,
Okay.
other than telling them that they can't have things because it's going to take too long. We don't have enough designers.
Yeah, okay. But actually, executives the last years, brought the role of product designer again into the digital domain. So
Hmm.
we have product designers as a role. Do you see it as a bridge between product and design, or is it just a catchy job title for designers? Actually, based on your experience, how effective is this role? What is this role, and how effective is this role that has both product and design in the job description?
Right. So what I see, the way that I see product designers is, first of all, it puts design under product organizationally. It just does. Secondly, I think that implicit in that is we're not doing journey maps. We're not doing contextual inquiry. We're not doing heavy research and concept exploration because we're not doing strategy. And I think that that's really the shift there, is that the strategic influence of the product designer is constrained in the context of that role. Um, Again, this is working very successfully for organizations all over the world. So I'm not here to argue that it's a bad thing. It simply is a different value proposition where design has a different role to play, and the leaders have to bring different strengths in order to help it play that role.
Okay, do you see that product designers actually own the problems, or do they own just the solution? Because you said about that they don't do.
I'm not really seeing product designers owning problems. No, I think they're much more. I mean, in what I'm seeing, again, I'm sure that there are product designers out there who would argue that they have a lot more ability to own their problems, but that's not what I see generally.
So actually, we have product designers, but we also need product managers to own the problem. Is this a correct statement?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Hmm. Hmm.
Okay, that's clear. Thank you very much for being so clear, actually, in those sense, because actually we see a lot of people like being in a mess of what am I, what I need to do in this company, what I want to do in my career, and these three different. It's actually three different things. It should be one,
Hmm.
but there are three different things. So it's very important to hear you talking about these roles, because we actually get new perspectives. Everyone gets a new perspective to see it differently and actually find something that make uh, it's okay for them and it's okay for the organization they are in, because actually it's all about what you are doing in your daily life, what you are achieving, and
Hmm.
having a perfect fit. But it's great to hear to get these perspectives from you. So thank you very much for
Yeah.
your answers. Dimitris, are you going to give a question, because I have a lot of questions?
Yes, I have one. Because you say, people, as you mentioned right now, people are changing their roles, and they're changing their titles, and there is a trend, I would say, of designers becoming product. Let's call that,
Hmm.
generically product. And this seems to be, as time passes, it's quite a common pattern. And once you said that if you want to sit at the table, become a PM. So based on that, and on your experience, is the average PM, user-centric enough? And do you feel that this trend is, from people going from product, from design to product, is it, justified to be happening?
I Again, in a lot of organizations, the PM is the one who actually gets to decide what gets built.
Mhm. Yeah.
We have this concept of the PM as the CEO of the product, right? The idea that they ought to have this kind of absolute dominion over the priorities of the team and the shape of and the feature set of what gets delivered. So if that's how your leadership is framing the PM role, it's just like I said back in Memphis 15 years ago. If you want that seat, go get that job. Um, it means potentially leaving behind some of the parts of your job that you are very attached to, in terms of having a degree of deep, direct influence over the texture of the actual experience that people have with it. It means, potentially stepping out of your comfort zone in terms of stepping away from the more creative elements of your job, stepping into the more analytical and operational elements of your job. But the trade-off is you get that authority and you get that power. Um, in other organizations, there is a place for you to be able to lead from the designer's seat. But I think the challenge is going to continue to be managing those expectations and reminding people of the value of having a design team that has a more of a strategic value proposition.
Okay. Jesse, Christine gave a comment like, as a product designer myself, I would have to agree that my influence on what we build is limited. Sometimes the PM and PO even try to influence you on selecting the solution they prefer. So the question
Mm-hmm.
is, do PMs own the solution? Do PMs have decision making on the solutions? Not what is being done, but actually what it would be better regarding the PM role and the product designer role and the problems and the solution.
I've seen a lot of PMs operate in exactly the way that Christine describes. So that's not surprising to me at all. Again, organizationally, if design is not a separate organization reporting to a separate leader who has parity with the product leader, then yeah, eventually product will win that argument. Because if you have to escalate, you can only escalate so far, but product can keep going,
Yeah.
right?
Okay. Okay. Yeah. We're talking a lot about product, but actually we need to discuss the design thing through the product lens in order to make things clear. So, two questions. Do you observe PMs moving toward design or development? We see designers and developers going into PM, but do you see PMs moving toward design or development? No,
Um,
it's a rhetorical question. So the no is the first answer that
yeah,
comes from our mind. So the question is, why do you think that this happens?
I, I I'm not sure why it happens. I think that if you're in a PM role, there is a way that you can do the PM role, which is kind of a design flavored PM. There is also a way to do that role that is more of a kind of technology flavored PM where you get to choose where you dig in as a PM. And I think that having been in that place, if you were going to be a developer, you would have been a developer by now, you know. I think is what it comes down to. And once you find yourself in that product management role, there's no need for you um, to kind of shift all the way into one of these other disciplines because you already get to play with their toys. So, in terms of your earlier question about it, like, are product managers user centered enough? Almost certainly not, right? They can't be, if only because we'd have better products than we do. But I think the opportunity for designers who are transitioning into product is honestly to compete on the job market with product managers on the basis of your user centeredness, that you bring a perspective and you bring a toolkit to the product management role that somebody who's only ever been a product person can't. And so I think that there's an opportunity there.
Okay, how do you see like the future version of what we are talking right now? So in our 100th meetup that you're going to join us again, we will ask you the same question. So what is the PM role nowadays if the average PM is user-centric and if there is a clear distinction between what a PM owns and what a product designer owns? So how do you see the future? That these things are going to be cleared up or
I think, yeah. So again, we've got a really diverse environment. What we can expect is that environment will continue to evolve around probably a couple of models. And those models will have their advocates
Mhm.
and they will have their case studies that they point to that show that their model is the way to do things. Um, but it probably doesn't settle out into just one way to do it, just because the range of products that need to be created is so diverse. Um, you know, a, an automobile factory doesn't look anything like an airplane factory, despite the fact that they're both basically building vehicles, right? And you're going to need a lot of the same skills, but you need to combine them in different ways, and your development processes are going to be different. Your testing processes are going to be different. So I think it's a very similar kind of thing. Being, um, being a product designer inside a great big bank like Capital One is going to be a very different experience from being a product designer for a local government, or being a product designer for, an educational institution, or any number of different things where you're just meeting radically different needs through this infinitely malleable technology that we all work with.
Okay, that's something to get and think about. Thank you very much for that. Dimitris, we have a lot of comments in the chat. I'm not sure if they are comments or questions. Do you have any questions based on those comments?
Uh, to be honest, no, I see the frustration that Christine is letting us know that, she says that shouldn't we be presented with the data, the data that the PMs have
Right.
in order to make the decisions, instead of just, being handed off a request and that's it. And my comment, if I could say on that, is that, as you said, things are going to somehow evolve and mature. And we have all those VPs on design that they still don't know what exactly they have to do. And as I understand from our conversation, things are going to get, I hope, better in the years that are coming. Do you feel so positive like I do at least at this very moment?
I do. I feel positive about the field overall. I think that it's going to be it's I think that we still, among the first generation, uh, we still have a lot of learning to do, and we're going to continue to make mistakes along the way. Um, but we are getting better at this. We are better at this. I mean, the baseline quality of the experiences that we put out into the world collectively as a field is it's better now than it was 5 years ago, which is better than it was 5 years before that. I mean, it's getting better very quickly, and the tools are getting very robust. I think that looking at where product and design intersect, I think it's really interesting um, to as much as frustrating as it is to have PMs kind of solving the problem for us. At the same time, more accessible design tools make it possible for broader collaboration to happen, and that's part of what's happened with the rise of Figma. Right? Is that design is more cross-functional now than it's ever been. So I think that there are a lot of opportunities, but it might mean leaving behind some of the images that we had of what successful design organizations look like. You know.
Yep, that's understandable, to be honest.
Mm.
And I feel that it goes, that direction. I actually agree with you. And we have another question from Thanos, and he's asking, could we have people that just own the problem like a PM without leaving the design stuff that you might be attached to behind? On the problem, lead the solution and execution. Let's
Hmm.
name that as a product designer. Could we have those?
I think that's entirely possible. I think that the questions that come up for me uh, about that would have to do with accountability and ownership, and how you measure the success of such a person. Um, the breadth of that responsibility, I think, requires a degree of accountability that um, can be hard to distribute effectively across a team. That accountability wants to be centralized. And so that's why I think that it's kind of coming to product managers who potentially work with multiple product designers rather than product designers having that same level of ownership. So it does seem like it's possible. I think that the question is how do the processes and the organizations need to evolve in order to create the space for that role?
Okay, great. Thank you very much for your answer.
Now I want to ask a personal question, going back to process. So in my personal experience, I see people that they are like too focused on the process. I see people that they are too focused on the outcome, and I see much less people being focused on the balance between process and outcome. And when I saw again this same talk back on 2009, you said exactly that thing to people of 15 that were senior 15 years ago. You said that
Yeah.
do we focus more? You actually asked some questions, and you said, I see people focusing on the process, not on the outcome or the produced outcome. I can't recall the exact words, but it was
Yeah.
actually process versus outcome. So, do you think that nowadays designers are more focused on the process or on the outcome? Have anything changed these 15 years?
Uh, but there's more talk about outcomes than there used to be, for sure. When I look at the topics that are being discussed, if I look at LinkedIn and things like that, and just track a few tags there and see what the conversation is about, um, there are people who are definitely still geeking out about process and geeking out about the fine nuts and bolts of getting the job done. But I still see a richer conversation about the strategic elements of this work than I think I have ever. Um, yeah, I don't know how much it's changed exactly, but I think that you do have people are I hear people every once in a while was like some post will be about some kind of fundamental element of the work, and somebody would say, I don't know why we're still talking about this. We've been talking about this for 20 years. And like, well, there are different people in the conversation now than there were 20 years ago, and that conversation is still a relevant conversation. So as I see it, the conversation just continues to expand.
Okay. So I have to ask this as a follow-up question. Is it hard to find this balance between process and outcome? Because actually, I was thinking about like again in another talk you said about I think you said about business being more business perspective and actually being more design perspective. I think it was in that keynote talk or in that talk
Mm-hmm.
regarding the designers being like idealists or something like that. So I was wondering if we add the business perspective, the product perspective to designers, do we harm their secret superpowers or not? So actually, is it fair to ask for designers to balance the process with the outcome, or is it slightly unfair? So a rhetorical.
I think that's a I think it's an excellent question. It's an excellent question that I don't have a very clear answer for. Um, I I I think the question really is, what is the highest value that a designer can offer an organization? And is it better to clear away all of the business and strategy and all the spreadsheet stuff and just let them sit and draw? Just let them draw and you'll get the best work that you can out of them. Or is it better to have them in all of those meetings that lead up to the making of the thing and have them engaged in, you know, influencing certain kinds of decisions and things like that? The I think a lot of it depends on, again, the expectations that have been set around you, the spaces that are created in your processes, and what you can actually take credit for and take accountability for.
Okay, so find your own way based on what you can provide as value, right? So it's all about the values you provide, the values needed, and we have to solve this equation on its specific different case, right?
Yeah, I think that is all as much as I would love to for there to be a kind of a neat universal solution here. I don't think it exists, not yet, anyway.
That's so fair to be heard of you. So that's actually giving us the perspective of what the things, how the things are today. So what to expect, what fights you have to give, what you're going to find as set in stone, and what things you have to fight for. And is actually this perspective that it's not missing, but it is not, many junior people are not aware, but they still need to find what they do, what values they can provide, and what values
Mhm.
can be absorbed by or the organization. So it's a game. This is the game. You have to play the game. So
Yes.
there are no rules
That's
yet. So you have to define the rules on its different game. Thank you very much for being so clear about that. Okay, we have a few minutes left. So I think that regarding the topics, we went from the 30 years ago. So we have to close with the future and questions about AI, of course. But I think that we have some questions from the audience. Dimitris, is this correct?
Yes, yes. So Anastasia asked, it's quite a long one, so I try to be as quick as possible. Anastasia asked, I have used the elements model as a way to understand what we are doing at any moment, mostly as a guideline reference to remember where we are, what is relevant at each design development stage, and where we are aiming at each step. Technical research-oriented people were not very interested. I wonder if this is random or if it would be different if applied as a communication reference in a project in case it is privately funded project vs a research or external funded project.
um, different audiences are going to respond to elements in different ways. Uh, in some cases, it's better not to try. Um, and in some cases, it can be something that you can return to. So I would, I'm not sure that it would be different necessarily with a privately funded project versus a research funded project. Um, or, different fields have cultures that they become accustomed to consuming information in certain ways and viewing and understanding processes in certain ways. And in a lot of ways, it's often about adapting your communication style to what they're used to from their subject matter domain.
Nice. Thank you very much. So we have to do this, this question right now, because
Yeah.
we're living in this kind of era. So, as you know, with AI increasingly influencing design processes, how can design leaders help their teams embrace these technologies as tools rather than drivers? What strategies can leaders use to ensure that teams remain adaptable, focused, on what matters most and continue to develop essential human-centric skills alongside those
Hmm.
technological advancements?
Yeah. 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 So, in this case, I would like to refer to the double diamond model, which is a model that's familiar to many designers of the design process, which involves these phases of uh, generative work, where we are creating possibilities and exploring an expanding set of possibilities, followed by evaluative work, where we're doing the kind of the refinement and the drawing judgments about what we've generated. You'll notice that the technologies that we're working with today are generative AI. And so my recommendation is use the generative technologies in the generative phases of your design work. But don't ask them to evaluate your work. Ask them to generate new ideas for you, but you retain the human control over the evaluative phases of your work. Um, to my mind, that's the best way to leverage both the human and the robot in the scenario.
Great, great. That's awesome. And one final question. Lina asked, what role do you see designers and product managers playing in this AI-driven future?
Mm-hmm. I think that the big question of where AI is going to fit into the mix has to do uh, with prototyping. Actually, I think every PM out there would love to be able to get a testable prototype of an idea faster uh, and instantly if they could, right? And so then the question is, how do the product, if the technology does eventually get to a place where you could prompt an AI for a prototype, then the question is, how do product and design sit down together to create that prompt in a way that genuinely embodies what you want to put in front of users? So it's a process question, like a lot of these things are.
Thank you very much for answering all those questions. Yanni?
Yeah, I think we need to ask a last question and actually connect. Jesse, when we have like pioneers like you, we want to lean back, like watching a documentary and actually let the story fill our mind. So the question that I would like to hear in this documentary, when leaning back, is like, can you recall discussions that you had back 30 years ago about the future of UX and the future of this field? So which parts of that vision became reality? And which parts didn't?
So many things became reality. So many of the things we imagined happened. It really felt like a magical time where dreams could come true. Some of the things we were hoping for took a lot longer to come about than we expected, which to my mind means that every part of that vision is still possible. It might just be a matter of time.
Okay, I think we must just close this meeting with this quote because it's a quote to take it with us and think about a lot. Jesse, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been really an honor to host you here at the UX quiz community and answering all these questions. Thank you very much. We look forward to hopefully welcoming you back in the future.
I
Indeed.
love that idea. Thank you so much. Thank you, all of you, for spending part of your evening with me. I do appreciate it, and good luck to all of you in the work you're doing.
Thank you very much to everyone. Thank you for your questions and your participation. We received a lot of questions that we couldn't address all of them today. Actually, we gave you a lot of questions. Thank you for answering almost all of them, but we have more to go. So actually, we can use LinkedIn and we can combine that with our gifts. So you can ask them in on LinkedIn or say hi or introduce yourself or like post a highlight from today's live Q&A with Jesse. But don't forget to use the hashtags UX and UX Greece for about 4 more hours, and you'll have the chance to win some fantastic books. Thanks to our sponsors, the UX Prodigy, Evidence-Based, Zansi Labs, and From Scratch Studio. To our sponsors, thank you for helping us make this event possible, events like that possible. Make sure to follow UX Greece on LinkedIn for updates about upcoming meetups and check out all past recordings on our website and our YouTube channel. Thanks. That's all for today. Thank you very much, Jesse. Once again, thank you very much, and I hope to see you soon in a future meetup we're going to have.
Maybe it will be an in-person one.
Oh, that's a great idea.
I love that idea. Thank you
Thanks a
all
lot.
so much. Have a great evening.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Okay, we usually keep the microphones on without recording for more informal conversations. If you have any question, any topic, anything you would like to ask for next meetups, we are here to discuss that. Just again, thank you very much. Actually, I meant every word I said. That it's so great to hear how you think, how people like you think about the concerns of today's people. Because actually, you were there at the first years, and you are here today working with leaders. So you can combine all these, different, actually 3 different decades. So you can see from a high level that most of us cannot. So it's very actually relaxing to hear that our concerns are your concerns. And of course, hearing you being optimistic and say that, guys and everyone, this is the first period of what we are doing. So relax, enjoy that, play the game, embrace the game, enjoy the game. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I appreciate it. Take care, everyone.